Wow. That is the only way I can describe this episode is just wow. This was absolutely insanely incredible. I mean, last week's episode, it was good, and, Loki season 2 overall has just been amazing, but as I talked about in my review last week for episode 4, I didn't exactly love it. It felt like a step down, but man, this episode was, like I said, just wow. The only thing I didn't like about this episode was that Owen Wilson himself did not say, wow. Because, like, that was just his point. Like, it's a classic thing, but okay, whatever. It's fine. Other than that, it was insane. It really was. This was the most shocking episode I've seen in all of the MCU. This felt like rewatching Avengers Infinity War. And as I was watching, I got a notification pop up on my phone from Twitter, or X, I'm not going to call it X, but Twitter, saying, somebody said, it feels like I just watched Avengers Infinity War again. And, obviously, as I'm watching it, like, so many theories pop up. And I'm like, what could that mean? But now, after watching it, I see exactly what they meant. And guys, I can't go any further into this without spoilers. Of course, spoiler warning, if you have not seen this yet, go check out Loki Season 2, Episode 5 on Disney+. You don't want to miss it. It was absolutely fantastic. This is my favorite episode of the season. It was so good. And last week, of course, it had a pretty big ending where the screen just goes to white. This big portal opens up, and it looks like the TVA is... Well, we don't really know what happened. At least at the time, we had no clue what was happening and what happened to our favorite characters. It was just gone, supposedly. And now we find out in this episode, it wasn't exactly a destruction of everything. It was more of a reset. So we see in this episode that Loki is now at the TVA alone. He's all by himself. Everybody is gone. Everything is dark. It's just him. And then suddenly the spaghettification starts, which I love how that's just a term we use now, spaghettification. Like, it's happened at least 2 or 3 different times in the MCU now. It happened, obviously, to Mr. Fantastic in Multiverse of Madness. Rest in peace, Reed Richards, smartest man alive. But then, obviously, last episode with Victor Timely, yikes. That was a really graphic one, too. But this time, the whole TVA just turns to spaghetti, basically. And then Loki's time slipping, of course, is back as well. And so we get to see in this episode that now, with this reset, all of our TVA characters are now back to their regular lives on the sacred timeline. Which is really interesting because that was obviously one of the big revelations in Season 1 is that all of these characters, they're variants. They're real people that were basically kidnapped from the sacred timeline and forced to work at the TVA. And that's been kind of one of the questions and discussions throughout the season is what would you want the opportunity to go back to that life? And one of my favorite parts of this season so far, I believe it was episode 2, I think, between Loki and Mobius, when Mobius was just talking about how no, he wouldn't want to experience it because he was saying like, oh, if it's bad, I can deal with that, but what if it's something good? And we see in this episode that it is something good. Obviously, Mobius on the jet ski is fantastic. Best scene of the episode. That's something we've been waiting for since we first heard mention of the jet skis from Mobius in Season 1, and now we finally get to see that brought to fruition here. Absolutely beautiful. Cinematic masterpiece. Love seeing it. So not only does he sell jet skis, and his name is Dawn, which... honestly, pretty cool name, Dawn. But on top of that, he has children. He's a single father. His wife's long gone, but he has kids. And so it does bring up that question, like, if Mobius knew about this whole time, that in the sacred timeline, he had kids, and he basically left his kids on the timeline so that he could go work at the TVA, would he want to go back to that? Again, he wouldn't be able to live with that. Like he said, if it's something good, I couldn't live with that. He couldn't just have that rattling around in his mind, and now who knows where that's going to go. We also have, of course, our other characters. We got Casey, who is now a prisoner escaping Alcatraz. Hunter B-15 is a nurse. And OB, very interestingly, is not that far off from his TVA version, where he is a scientist who works at Caltech, but he actually hates his job. He wants to be a writer. He wants to write science fiction, and he keeps writing his books and trying to sell them in bookstores. It's not working out. But when Loki comes to explain things to him, he's like, oh yeah, I totally believe you. And just like at the TVA, he's kind of the he's the scientist of the group. He's the mechanic, so he's able to build a temporal loom. And basically, this episode has spent Loki going around recruiting all of these different characters because Obi, I think in this version, his name is Doug. He explains basically that if they could get all of these TVA people together, they could measure their temporal aura and kind of use it as a map to discover where the TVA is. And so we get the whole crew together. Things are kind of explained. I love the moments between Loki and Mobius in this episode, especially because, again, just you see how deeply Mobius cares about his kids, even though they're a pain in the butt to him, and one of them's lighting matches and action figures on fire. It's great. I absolutely love that. But so we get the whole crew together here, and they're like, oh, is this it? Is there anybody else? And Loki's like, there's one more. So he, of course, goes to see Sylvie, who Sylvie, like Loki, still remembers everything from what happened before. So she's, of course, working at McDonald's in her branch timeline, and things are all good. And she basically tells Loki, and this was another beautiful scene, where they just talk about how, really, why is Loki doing this? Why is Loki so obsessed with getting the TVA back? And he finally admits that it's just because he wants his friends back. He doesn't know who he is or what he would do without these people and without the TVA. That's just what his life is now. And she helps him come to the realization that that's kind of selfish. And yes, Sylvie herself, she's selfish as well. That's what being a Loki is. And so it's, again, just a fantastic conversation that they have here together. I really enjoyed it. So then Loki goes back and he's basically like, you know what, never mind, guys. You can all go back to living your lives. It would be unfair of me to take that away from you. So he basically calls it quits and is like, I need to figure this out on my own. But then Sylvie, she is back to living her life in her branch timeline, and the spaghettification starts again. It was a really it was a nice peaceful moment. Like, I thought the episode was actually going to end with that, like with her putting on the headphones and listening to this record. Great song that was playing. I don't know the name of it, but sounded nice. She's just sitting there listening to music, and I thought the episode was going to end, but no. Then the spaghettification starts again. Everything in this branch timeline turns to spaghetti. She goes to meet up with the rest of the crew. She's like, basically, never mind. Everything is turning to spaghetti. We need to fix this. And Loki's like, oh no. But then everybody starts turning to spaghetti. But then our big ending of the episode is that Loki finally realizes and learns how to control his time slipping, which of course that's the key to this. Now the episode ends with him time slipping on purpose back to the TVA right before the loom was destroyed. Now my question is this before or after the death of Victor Timely? Like, are we going to get more of that? Obviously we know Jonathan Majors is going to be in next episode, and he's going to play a pretty major role. If you checked out my video yesterday about the Variety article talking about how Marvel is in shambles and all that stuff, I highly recommend that if you haven't already. I talked about that quite a bit there. Jonathan Majors, Kang, is going to be a big thing in episode 6. But also, they released a mid-season trailer before this episode, which spoiled a lot about this episode. That's why I didn't cover it or break it down or anything. I still ended up watching it, and I wish I didn't. But still, this episode, again, was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. It was so shocking. I mean, last episode, a lot of people said was shocking. As I talked about in my review, I didn't really find the big surprise and reveals super duper shocking. Like, didn't really hit me that hard. But this episode, it hit me hard. Because like I said, it was like watching Avengers Infinity War again. Just watching all these people just spaghettify. And, you know, it was like them turning to dust in Infinity War. It was crazy. But I loved it. And I don't exactly know where things are going to go in episode 6. But of course, next week, episode 6 is the finale of this season. I'm assuming things are going to be set up directly here to go into Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, and Secret Wars. again, as I talked about in that video yesterday, we'll see whether those movies end up happening with Kang and all that stuff. But man, I loved it. It was great. It was truly fantastic. And of course, you guys can let me know your own thoughts in the comments below. What did you think about this penultimate episode of Loki Season 2? What did you think about getting to see everybody's real lives on the sacred timeline? What did you think about Loki learning the time slip? And of course, that big ending and all your theories for this finale. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video and hit the subscribe button so I keep up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.